We begin, though, with the latest on the horrific school shooting in Uvalde this morning. We have newly released video revealing what unfolded inside Robb Elementary School over the course of more than an hour.
The footage was obtained and released just days before it was set to be shown to families, and it's casting more doubts on law enforcement's response. NBC News correspondent Sam Brock has the latest, and we do want to warn you some of this video might be disturbing.
After weeks of agonizing waiting, the Austin American-Statesman, along with KVUE, releasing a highly edited 4-minute compilation of videos, including never-before-seen surveillance from inside the school, outside the building, and police body cam footage, shedding more light on how the law enforcement response unfolded. The gunman walks across the parking lot and into the school at 11:33. Casually carrying a rifle and turning a corner in the hallway, a young student comes around the corner as the shooter walks down the hall. Seconds later, gunfire erupts, lasting for more than 2 minutes. The young child runs away. 3 minutes later, the first officers enter the school. As the gunfire continues, some officers approach the classrooms, while others hold back. More shots, and they retreat. 19 minutes after the gunman entered, heavily armed reinforcements arrive with ballistic shields, holding up their weapons but standing at the end of the hallway, waiting for nearly half an hour. Eventually, a unit moves in a stack formation toward the classroom door, others again holding back. 48 minutes after the gunman entered, more rounds and inaudible conversation. One officer seen getting hand sanitizer while the gunman is still a threat in the classroom. After 77 minutes, a volley of gunfire when Border Patrol officers finally breached the classroom.
Their sense of urgency did not seem to be really felt or seen in that video. Instead, we know that those 19 children and 2 teachers were inside that classroom, and it took more than an hour for them to finally breach the door.
The whole police system in Uvalde failed us.
Vincent Salazar's 4th grade granddaughter, Layla, was killed.
What aspect of the video do you think is going to be the most painful for you, but necessary to see?
When they sat back because they got gunfire, they retreated. The officers ain't trained to retreat when they're going to do. They have to save these children, and they did not do that.
The video's release follows weeks of pain and outcry from some of Uvalde's youngest community members.
I usually run into my sister in the restroom.
Like Jasmine Cazares, who lost her sister, Jackie.
I forgot to say good morning. And I think that's going to haunt me for the rest of my life. I'm doing this for you, sister.
Families trying to reconcile systemic failures and an apparent lack of answers.
The answers we don't get is why they didn't act to protect these babies.
Well, thanks to Sam Brock for that report. Let's bring in NBC News law enforcement analyst, Chief Cedric Alexander. Good to have you with us. So before this video was released, a top Texas public safety official called law enforcement's response to the shooting a, quote, abject failure. What do you call it now after watching this video? What are the moments that stand out most when you're looking at the officer's response?
Well, I mean, it's really a very, very difficult video to watch for someone who has been a first responder, knowing that the children in those classrooms and teachers were being slaughtered. And you had men outside who had shields, had helmets, had vests, had high-powered rifles themselves, and failed, quite frankly, to do the job that they were supposed to be sworn to do. It is very difficult for me to watch this video on so many different levels. And I know how painful it must be for the parents and the friends of these victims to watch, because here they expected in their community law enforcement to respond and to respond aggressively. And when they heard shots fired, once they went down that hallway, they retreated and came back. It is just a total failure. I think a lot of people need to be held responsible. There's been a lot of finger pointing, and I've been saying this for weeks, that too many people on that scene they truly need to be held accountable.
I want to ask you more about that. I mean, we know the school district police chief, Pete Arredondo, has been blamed for a slow response to the shooting. But according to the Austin American-Statesman, the video shows really that multiple responding agencies were on the scene. That includes officers from the Uvalde Police Department, the Sheriff's Department, law enforcement at the state, even the federal levels. So we want to note we've reached out to law enforcement officials in Uvalde for comment. We are still waiting to hear back. But when you do have multiple forces converging on a scene like that, how do you coordinate that? What should be the protocol?
Well, in a situation like that, even if there's no appointed leadership, there's enough experience and trained officers there that they take action. They started to take action. They went down the hallway. They heard some gunfire, which were children being slaughtered inside, and they retreated back. And for 77 minutes, we had to watch this, and these parents have to watch this. So the blame can go in a whole bunch of places, quite frankly. And every law enforcement agency that was represented on that scene have to share in some responsibility, including Director McGraw's state police. Because you remember at the onset of this, there was a lot of high-fiving of heroism and et cetera, et cetera. But as things continued to unfold, we learned something different. And thank God for Border Patrol showing up on that scene and taking action. But this could have been stopped much, much earlier. And that's the price you pay when you're a sworn officer. You go to a school shooting. We train people. We're coming in to take that gunfire away from people who are defenseless. That clearly did not happen here. And it's embarrassing and it's shameful, and it never should have happened that way. And my heart goes out to that community for a failure of law enforcement officials who was there, who were slow in their actions.
Cedric Alexander, thanks so much for joining us this morning. We always appreciate your analysis and your expertise.
Thank you for having me.
Turning now to the latest from the ongoing January 6th hearings. Yesterday, committee members laid out evidence that they say showed former President Trump was trying desperately to hold on to power after losing the 2020 election, while pushing that so-called big lie to supporters, saying that the election was stolen.
The committee zeroed in on several key points. One was the rhetoric leading up to the attack, showcasing a tweet from the former president that one rioter said inspired the planning for an insurrection. Another focus was an Oval Office meeting about the election results that was described as unhinged. There was also testimony from the former Oath Keepers spokesperson and new information about possible witness tampering in the investigation. We're going to dig into it all and start with showing you some of the major moments from the hearing.
President Trump is still promoting the big lie about the election. How does that make you feel?
It makes me mad because I was hanging on every word he was saying. Everything he was putting out, I was following it.
We know that you illegally entered the Capitol that afternoon and then left the Capitol area later on. What made you decide to leave?
Basically, when President Trump put his tweet out, we literally left right after that come out. You know, to me, if he would have done that earlier in the day, 1:30, we wouldn't be in this, maybe we wouldn't be in this bad of a situation or something.
President Trump's former campaign manager, Brad Parscale, recognized the impact of the speech immediately. And this is what he said on January 6th in excerpts from text messages to Katrina Pearson. Mr. Parscale said, quote, "This is about Trump pushing for uncertainty in our country, a sitting president asking for civil war."
I think the best illustration for what the Oath Keepers are happened January 6th, when we saw that stacked military formation going up the stairs of our Capitol. I can tell you that they may not like to call themselves a militia, but they are. They're a violent militia.
In his inaugural address, Trump introduced one commanding image: American carnage. Although that turn of phrase explained little about our country before he took office, it turned out to be an excellent prophecy of what his rage would come to visit on our people. American carnage. That's Donald Trump's true legacy.
After our last hearing, President Trump tried to call a witness in our investigation, a witness you have not yet seen in these hearings. That person declined to answer or respond to President Trump's call. Let me say one more time, we will take any effort to influence witness testimony very seriously.
For more on this, let's bring in NBC News reporter Julie Sirkin. Julie, good morning. So let's start with what we just heard at the end there, this allegation from Committee Vice Chair Liz Cheney that former President Trump tried calling a potential witness after the last hearing. What more can you tell us about that?
Yeah, this is the second hearing in a row that Vice Chair Liz Cheney is making this kind of cliffhanger, essentially, saying that former President Trump or his allies have engaged potentially in witness tampering of the very people that they are trying to interview and depose to get to the bottom of what happened on January 6th. Now, after that happened yesterday, we asked Benny Thompson, the chairman, more about this. He simply said they don't know for certain if this witness that Liz Cheney referred to ended up receiving the call from former President Trump exactly to witness tamper. They don't know what the call was about. And for his part, former President Trump responded on his social media platform saying that it's, quote, a hoax, which is as true as me trying to strangle a Secret Service agent from behind in what Cassidy Hutchinson said was the beast. That's part of Cassidy Hutchinson's testimony, of course, from 2 weeks ago. So we really don't know the bottom line, whether the former president did engage in witness tampering, but Benny Thompson, Liz Cheney made it very clear that they kicked this up to the Department of Justice to investigate.
Julie, the committee also focused on an explosive and expletive-filled Oval Office meeting that happened back in December of 2020 that's been described as unhinged between White House officials and prominent election deniers. Take us through why the committee says that meeting was so important.
Yeah, and they used Pat Cipollone, the White House lawyer's testimony from last week, to illustrate why that was so important. The committee did a methodical job of piecing together video from Sidney Powell, Rudy Giuliani, all these other folks that they interviewed who were in that Oval Office meeting with the former president without any official White House staff, like Pat Cipollone, who he said when he walked in, he was completely caught off guard. It was midnight. Everybody was yelling, trying to, of course, find a way to move forward with these election fraud claims. But I want you to take a listen to, in their own words, what exactly happened that night in that meeting.
I mean, at times there were people shouting at each other, hurling insults at each other.
You're asking one simple question as a general matter. Where is the evidence? So what response did you get? Things like this, like, what do you mean, where's the evidence? You should know, and things like that, or, a disregard, I would say, a general disregard for the importance of actually backing up what you say with facts.
I would have fired all of them that night and had them escorted out of the building.
The committee really illustrated this tug of war between White House officials, between the advisors who were employed in the White House and by former President Trump, and others like the CEO of Overstock and all of these other figures that Pat Cipollone himself said he had no idea what they were doing in the White House advising the president.
We also learned that former President Trump ad-libbed some key lines in his January 6th rally speech. What did he change, and why is that significant?
Yeah, the committee also laying this out very importantly before they spoke to their witness, Stephen Ayers, who you heard from at the top, who was a rioter on that day, who actually said that the words former President Trump used is what inspired most of them to go to the Capitol. Some things he changed, including adding references to former Vice President Pence 8 times rather than just one in the speech. Remember, he encouraged the former vice president to overturn the election results, to not certify them on that day. Another reference, most importantly, was encouraging the rioters to go to the Capitol and saying he would be there to march with them, which, of course, we know he didn't do.
All right, Julie Sirkin, thank you so much.
Today is the first day of President Biden's 4-day visit to the Middle East, which includes stops in Israel, the occupied West Bank, and Saudi Arabia. The trip comes amid mounting challenges for the president, both at home and on the world stage. NBC News global correspondent Raf Sanchez joins us from Jerusalem. So, Raf, what can we expect from this trip?
Joe, President Biden has a couple of days of difficult and at times uncomfortable diplomacy ahead of him. He's going to be meeting reluctantly with Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. But first, he's coming here to Jerusalem without many answers about how to make progress on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
This morning, President Biden en route to the Middle East, heading to Israel and then Saudi Arabia. Both countries are U.S. allies, and both worry about the threat from Iran. but they don't yet have diplomatic relations. Israel's government tells us they hope Biden's trip will start to change that.
I would like, and maybe we expect, some positive steps between Saudi Arabia and Israel during your president's visit here.
But there's a price to diplomacy. Biden forced to meet face-to-face with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, best known as MBS. The CIA says he ordered the murder of Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi, an accusation he denies. Biden condemned Saudi Arabia on the campaign trail.
Make them, in fact, the pariah that they are.
But today, he's looking for Saudi help, saying he hopes they and other Arab states will pump more oil and lower gas prices for American drivers. Biden's Israel visit partly clouded by the killing of Shireen Abu Akleh, a veteran Palestinian-American journalist with Al Jazeera. The State Department says she was likely killed by mistake by Israeli troops back in May. Israel's military says it doesn't know who killed her. The U.S. not hopeful about restarting Israeli-Palestinian peace talks. The president will travel to Jerusalem and the occupied West Bank, but not to Gaza, where Hamas militants last year fired thousands of rockets at Israeli cities, and Israel carried out intense airstrikes. We headed to the isolated strip to see for ourselves.
Life in Gaza is unbelievably difficult. 4 wars in 15 years, an economy basically collapsed, and nobody here in this refugee camp tells us they think it's going to get any better under President Biden.
Zainab Al-Kolek lost her mother and 3 siblings in an Israeli strike.
They are not numbers. They have their lives. They have dreams.
She barely survived the bombing herself.
Actually, I remained under the rubble for 12 hours before I was pulled out.
You were underneath the rubble for 12 hours.
Yeah.
Do you remember that? What was it like under the rubble?
Yeah, I was conscious. I remember every second.
Today, she paints to remember her family and her loss.
This painting, it's a mix of colors and tears, actually.
Every picture a reminder of the cost of failing to achieve peace.
Now, this is President Biden's 10th trip to Israel overall. It's his first since taking office. He's going to spend today and tomorrow with the Israelis. On Friday, he's meeting the Palestinians, and then he's heading off on that complicated trip to Saudi Arabia Friday afternoon. Joe.
All right, Ralph, thank you so much. Let's talk more about President Biden's trip to the Middle East with William Wexler. He is the Senior Director of the Rafiq Hariri Center and Middle East Programs at the Atlantic Council. Good to have you with us, William. So when it comes to foreign policy, the Middle East has taken a bit of a back seat during the Biden administration, with the focus being more on competition with China and, of course, Russia's war with Ukraine. Why is this trip so important for the president right now?
This trip is critically important in order to reaffirm the U.S. commitment to the region, our relationship with our long-standing partners with whom we need to secure our interests in the region and, in fact, globally.
The White House says one of the president's goals is to deepen Israel's integration with Arab countries in the region. But of course, we need to talk about the relationship with the Palestinians, especially as tensions have been again high recently. Will the president, do you think the president will take a tougher stance on issues like Israel's settlement building, which is illegal under international law, and forced evictions of Palestinians from their homes? I mean, Palestinians living under occupation, I think, would like someone to be that broker and help rebuild these ties. But is it the president?
I think what you're going to hear from President Biden, who's going to spend over an hour talking to Mahmoud Abbas, the leader of the Palestinian Authority, is a firm commitment from the United States to support the two-state solution. That's the only solution that has a promise for a permanent settlement of the challenges between Israelis and the Palestinian people. He'll also hear President Biden talk about his commitment that the Palestinians share the same measure of freedom, security, and prosperity that is currently enjoyed by Israelis. You'll also likely to hear significant economic assistance given to the Palestinians, and you'll also, during the trip, will hear likely additional assistance from the Gulf countries to the Palestinians.
And William, I mean, President Biden is going to be urging Saudi Arabia and other Gulf countries to try and ramp up oil production when he heads to the kingdom then later this week. So in a bid to try and push prices down, it's being seen as sort of a reversal of his campaign position to make the country a, quote, pariah over its human rights abuses. Washington Post publisher Fred Ryan even wrote an opinion piece yesterday titled "Biden's Trip to Saudi Arabia Erodes Our Moral Authority." He says the trip sends a message that, quote, the U.S. is willing to look the other way when its commercial interests are at stake. What do you think? Do you agree with that view?
I don't. The United States has multiple interests in the region, including, of course, human rights, all of which need to be balanced. President Biden is not the first U.S. president to recognize the difference between talking on the campaign trail and dealing with the necessary complexities and inherent trade-offs of governance. This is the right decision to go to Saudi Arabia. And in fact, it's quite a normal decision. U.S. presidents always go to Saudi Arabia. Not going would be wildly abnormal. I believe President Obama went to Saudi Arabia 4 times. Reestablishing an effective working relationship between Washington and Riyadh is going to be his priority. And in this part of the world especially, national relationships are driven by personal relationships from the top down.
William Wexler, thanks so much for joining us this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Now, First Lady Dr. Jill Biden is facing backlash after comments she made about Latino diversity at an event in Texas on Monday. The First Lady apologized for the remarks that critics called offensive. NBC News Chief White House Correspondent Peter Alexander has the latest on this.
Dr. Jill Biden learning a painful political lesson. The First Lady to work outside the White House teaching at a Virginia community college, apologizing for a misstep Monday. During a speech to the nation's largest Latino civil rights group intended to celebrate the community's diversity.
Your fight is our fight, and we will stand with you.
Making headlines for a controversial comment after fumbling the pronunciation of New York's famed bodegas.
The diversity of this community, as distinct as the bodegas of the Bronx, as beautiful as the blossoms of Miami, and as unique as the breakfast tacos here in San Antonio.
The audience cheered, but the scripted comment generated backlash on social media. One prominent Hispanic group encouraging the First Lady and her team to take time to better understand the complexities of our people and communities, adding, "We are not tacos." Dr. Biden's spokesman tweeting the First Lady apologizes that her words conveyed anything but pure admiration and love for the Latino community. Dr. Biden has been a relentless advocate for her husband's agenda, visiting 40 states in less than 18 months. But this appearance is bringing unwanted attention to the president's closest political partner. Peter Alexander, NBC News.
The summer heat and humidity, they're sparking storms in several cities. So let's get a check on your morning news now. Weather.
Michelle Grossman is with us in studio. Hey, Michelle.
Hey there, guys. Yeah, we had storms in the Northeast yesterday. Today, we're going to move that to the south, and we're going to see some pretty gusty storms. So here's the setup here. We have some storms off to the southwest. That's monsoonal moisture. We have some storms in the Great Lakes, and then we have a front that's going to interact with some Gulf moisture, and that's going to bring some heavy rainfall. We could see up to 5 inches in some spots. So that's going to be the bullseye for today. We're seeing some storms even right now, seeing that lightning, hearing that thunder. And this is where we're expecting the chance for severe weather all the way from the Carolinas down to parts of Texas. Winds gusting up to 60 miles per hour. Could see some hail, even the chance of a tornado. That risk is low, but it's not zero. So we're going to watch that as we go throughout the afternoon hours. So this is the setup. We've seen rain for days. We're going to continue to see rain for days. We have that Bermuda high. You've heard of that, a big area of high pressure that's funneling in this Gulf moisture. It's interacting with that trigger of that front, and that's why we're going to see storms along this front today. So tropical air hits that front. We're going to generate torrential downpours. We could see 2 to 3 inches quickly within those downpours. And then we're going to see these over days. They're very slow moving. That low is lingering. It's meandering along the coast here, and it's aiding in these storms. And the ground is already so wet. We've been wet for weeks, and we're going to add to those totals over the next several days. So this is what it looks like in terms of your rainfall forecast. You can see those darker colors, the yellows, the reds, the oranges, and that's where we're looking at anywhere from 3 to 5 inches. Again, we could see more than that within those heavy downpours throughout this afternoon, and that extends through Sunday. talking about the dangerous heat once again, because this is a big story still. We have some heat warnings in the Intermountain West. We have them in the Rockies. And then we have 26 million people impacted in the South once again, still sweltering in the South with temperatures into the 90s to triple digits. We're sort of getting tired of this, and we're not even feeling it. So if you're in the South, that's where you're going to feel it once again today, again through the weekend as well. 104 in Dallas. It's going to feel like 106, and that heat extends until tomorrow, too. Lots of triple digits on the map once again.
Wow, yeah, look at that. Widespread, no kidding. Oh, all right, thanks, Michelle. See you in a bit.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.